Here we are, chapter 2 and chapter 3. And let me just tell you, I've really been kind of struggling all week with the best way to present this. I didn't necessarily want to just lecture at you, but as I mentioned in the comment, if we were together in an in-person class, we would just go through the book and talk and be able to discuss. So after looking at it, I went through and outlined all the steps that I wanted to cover. I think this is really the best way. So just kind of bear with me as we go through. There's so much good stuff in these two chapters. It really just kind of warrants more time and attention. Okay, personality. And this is kind of one of the ones that I wanted to hit in particular. So definition of personality, and there's a little laser pointer thing right there. It's a relatively enduring, the way I learned it, a relatively enduring, permanent set of traits and characteristics that define a person and remain constant across context or situations. So the definition that they're using, very similar, a relatively enduring pattern of thoughts, emotions, behaviors that characterize a person, along with the psychological processes behind those characteristics. So when we talk about personality, we're talking about a relatively stable, a relatively permanent set of traits and characteristics that define a person and that you see across time and across context. All right. So again, we're going to pull all this information out and play with it more in the chapter as we go. I call it the big five. I think that's more of a sporting goods thing. The 5-factor personality model, conscientiousness, and then within that we have these subdimensions: agreeableness, neuroticism, openness to experience, and extroversion. And we'll come back to extroversion on the next typology as well. So the 5-factor model, it takes a lot of individual personality dimensions and kind of boils them down to 5 groups, and then has these different, set of traits and characteristics underneath each of those. So conscientiousness, are you organized? Are you dependable? Are you thorough? Agreeableness, something different. I'm thinking research methods, and this is a different dimension. So with agreeableness, we're talking about trusting, being helpful, being good-natured. Neuroticism, anxious, insecure, self-conscious, openness to experience. Okay, these, and then extroversion, outgoing, talkative, and energetic. So a lot of individual type personality dimensions kind of grouped within 5. So that 5-factor model, just a really good model for taking a lot of those and making sense of it. Okay, the next one. Now this, actually what I would prefer for you to do right now, okay, so your textbook reflection for this week, due on Thursday night, is over this material right here. So I'm going to ask you some questions to reflect on it and to make sense of it. The Sunday reflection assignment for next week is actually, I want you to do 2 personality inventories, and I want you to do one, and you'll see it in the description of the assignment, is going to be basically the Myers-Briggs, but the work of Carl Jung. So actually, before you get into this and start understanding it, I'd really like for you to go in and jump out, find the directions for the Sunday reflection for this coming week, click on the link, do this assessment now before we go into it and describe what these are, so it doesn't bias your results. So you can go in and do it now and get your results, either save it or take pictures of it, and then be able to refer to it later for your reflection. So if you'd be up for doing that, I would love for you to go do it right now. Even if you know your Myers-Briggs personality types, I'd really like for you to go do it again and see if the results come up the same, as predicted, or if they might be a little different. Okay, so there are your directions, and you can always come back to this. Okay, so this is Myers-Briggs from the work of Carl Jung, and it has to do with preferences. And so these are the dimensions. There are 4 dimensions: extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. And let me tell you, the first time I was ever exposed to this was in my first master's class, my first leadership class. And the professor had us take our pens and switch hands, go to our non-dominant hand, and then write our full name in our notebook and in the whatever it is we were taking notes on. And as we were writing, which took a really long time, the professor was asking, well, how does that feel? Describe it. And people would say, well, it feels awkward. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like I'm in elementary school just learning how to write it. And then, and it looks sloppy. It's just not as comfortable. It's not natural. And then we had to switch back to our regular hand and write it. And kind of the opposites of all. It's comfortable. I don't have to think about it. It's automatic. I like it. It's that. Okay. So, and then the professor pointed out, he said, well, you actually were able to do it with your non-preferred hand, and you were able to do it with your preferred hand. Okay. What's the difference? Well, we have both of them in us. It's just that we tend to develop a preference, maybe because it is comfortable and easy and natural. And we don't like to practice with our wrong hand because of all the opposites. But we could. And so on the Myers-Briggs, when he introduced it to us, and me in particular, talked about these are continuums. So all four of these things here are continuums, and kind of out on one end would be, really introverted, and on the other end, really extroverted. But those people who are extroverts could be quiet and internal and abstract. And those introverts could be talkative, externally focused, and assertive. It's just that's not our preferred. It's kind of not how we're wired. And it's uncomfortable, and it's draining, and it's awkward. It feels unnatural, but you can do it. You have both of those in you. So really, these are a continuum. Being ambidextrous would be right in the middle of that continuum, right in the middle. So me, for example, you maybe could see it. I'm not sure if this thing shows backwards or not, but I'm actually left-handed, but I'm right-armed. And so if I'm writing or eating or shaving or doing things that involve fingers and hands, it's left. But if it involves throwing a ball or swinging a racket or something, then I do it right. Not ambidextrous. I'm mixed dominance. And so the things that I do with my left feel really awkward with my right. And then the things that I do with my right feel really awkward with my left. So that idea of ambidextrous is really that you have no preference. You're right in the middle. So as you do this result, I want you to look at the percentages on that human metrics, Young personality, Myers-Briggs scale. It'll show you your strength on these. And so you can note whether you're really strong out on one end or whether the percentages are really closer to the middle. Okay, so look at that. But let's just kind of pull this apart and go a little bit. Yeah, so you all do that. The values in the workplace. Let's bring up values. Values are those things that right here, stable, evaluative beliefs that guide our preferences. They define right and wrong, what we ought to do. They're learned. So in our upbringing, we learn these things and what's important in our lives. And then when faced with decisions, we can, refer and compare the decision and the alternatives back to our values. And maybe we'll regard certain things as we're not going to do that, and other things that would be acceptable because they don't violate our values and those things that we stand for and regard as important. Okay, so again, this goes back into this as well. Ethics. I taught a class last semester, a whole class on ethics. And so every org behavior book, we have to bring this up. But these ethical ideas, these principles of right and wrong, some of them are going to be defined, by the people, but also the organizations are going to define these too, and what the organization regards as right and wrong. And then even your industry is going to have standards. You can think about different types of jobs that have different ethical things that people have to abide by. But when you're studying individual differences, some of these models, these principles, utilitarian, the greatest good for the greatest number. So when I'm faced with making a decision, I would, if I'm a utilitarian, I would pick the thing that benefits the most people, but it's going to hurt some people, but the greater good is served by doing it. That's a utilitarian type perspective. The rights perspective says I will do or not do things based on whether it hurts people's rights, that we all have these fundamental human natural rights, and that if I do something that inflicts or infringes upon the rights of some other person, then I would regard that as not being an acceptable alternative and that I would do something else. And then the idea of justice and distributive justice in particular. How do you fairly, equitably, equally, whatever it may be, distribute benefits or have to share the burdens? So distributive justice, how do we share this? How do we give it? I'm just thinking, I've got 3 kids, and when they were little, there were times where they all wanted the same thing. Well, how do I distribute that? What is equitable? What is fair across the 3 kids? So as managers, I do this as a professor, working with students, with grades, with resources, with opportunities that I have. How do we distribute these things in the best possible way? So, we really have to understand that and play with it. Okay, so dig into that ethics chapter. Again, this is just kind of one little slide for that. Now, Hofstede. This is a good one, and this is, well, they're all really good ones. This has to do, Gert Hofstede. Here, I'll go on and introduce him. Gert Hofstede, Dutch, and he was reading at one point, he was reading management theory. And it struck him that a lot of the management theory, now again, what's a theory? It's an explanation for how things work, grounded in the empirical method. And so, the whole process of coming up with hypotheses and then collecting data and then analyzing it and then comparing the results to your predefined decision points and then making conclusions. He read a lot of the management theory, and in his experience traveling around the world, he realized that a lot of the theories that we're out here that I'm talking about right now may not hold up in other parts of the world. So in our part of the world where this theory was developed, these two concepts, we may draw an arrow going this way. But he realized in another part of the world, that arrow actually may go the other way, and it's bound by culture. And so we have to make sense of culture before we can make sense of how things are going to work. And so what he did is he came up with these different dimensions, and then went in and classified countries, kind of the dominant culture within the country, on these different dimensions. And so really this one, in the book, they break it into individualism, high and low. We'll go along with that. I always learned it as individualism on one end and the collectivism on the other side, but this is fine. This allows us to kind of pinpoint where these different countries are. So individualism has to do with the individual and standing up and being responsible and accountable to yourself. This idea of freedom and self-sufficiency. It's you. It's the person. And so it shows that U.S. is relatively high on individualism, where other countries tend to be relatively low. So if you come from a collectivistic culture, individualistic culture, and then march into another country and expect work to be done and for, the arrows to go the same way, you may be surprised to realize that, hey, these people do work differently. And it's not bad. It's just the way they work. And I must be aware of that. All right. So individualism. The other one, like I said in the book, they broke it out into two of them. Collectivism has to do with the group and the bigger collective. Who do you put first? Yourself, the individual, or do you put kind of the team and the group and the organization and the family or the society, whatever it is, first, and then I will be second. So those are high collectivism. So you see on this one, kind of goes along with that last one, that the U.S., we tend to be relatively low on collectivism, higher on individualism, where these up here tend to be more higher on collectivism. So we would go in and when we're working with people, we need to realize that what drives them, what's important to them is the group, and the individual will kind of be secondary to that. All right, so that is Gert Hofstede. Actually, that's just one dimension. Here's the next one. It's power distance. Power distance right here. It has to do with the degree of difference between those in power, those who don't have the power. I like to think of it as kind of the haves and the have-nots. The ones who have say in society versus the ones who don't have say. So high power distance, there's a big gap. There's a lot of distance that's high. There's a big difference between those in power and those without power, the haves and the have-nots, if you want to just think of it a different way. So some countries are going to be higher in power distance. U.S. tends to be relatively low compared to some of these other countries. So again, you can read through there. There's a lot of work on Hofstede. So that's power distance. Uncertainty avoidance. And there's an individual level personality dimension called tolerance of ambiguity. And tolerance of ambiguity is really kind of an individual level concept of this one, which is more of a national culture. So within a culture, high uncertainty avoidance. I want to avoid uncertainty where you feel threatened by ambiguity and uncertainty. Low is that you're okay with it. You can tolerate it, may even like it, to deal with ambiguity and uncertainty. So the U.S., again, on this one, it looks like it's kind of, just to this side of the middle. And then we have some other countries that are low, that they're not actively trying to seek it out. But then there are other countries that do feel threatened, and they don't want uncertainty. They want everything very structured and predictable, and they know how things are going to be done. Where other countries thrive in that and can see, hey, that uncertainty brings about more opportunities. So it's just different. It's just different. Okay, so uncertainty avoidance. And then this one used to be called masculinity and femininity. And for some reason they just changed the name. I think people tried to interpret it too much, meaning, are males, kind of valued in this society, or are the females? Well, that's really not what it is. And it has to do with these things. It's characteristics. Okay, so those masculine characteristics originally identified by Hofstede talked about competitiveness and assertiveness and rushing and the way to what is valued in society is being first and being foremost and having control over things, versus those cultures where it's more about the relationships and it's caring and nurturing and developing people. That's what's valued. That's what's important. Okay, so on this one, he did change the name, and it's called this achievement orientation versus nurturing orientation. So the achievement orientations were that competition and got to be the first to win, and I'm assertive. Okay, these are the countries. You see, the U.S. is on that side of the middle on this one, where these countries down here tend to be more concerned about the group and the collective and consensus and nurturing and growing and developing. It's interesting if you go back and look at leadership theory. Okay, these are kind of the characteristics that were dominant during the Industrial Revolution. But since we became more team-based and saw the benefits of team, really the role of managers has changed as well. That we do need to pay attention. Think about the Hawthorne study. We need to pay attention to our people and nurturing and developing and growing our people. All right, so those are the main Hofstede dimensions. They went and added. Okay, here's chapter 3, perceptions and attributions, and some other topics as well. They're really good stuff. Okay, this first one, this idea of self-concept, an individual's self-beliefs and self-evaluations. These ideas of who am I? How do I feel about myself? It goes back to your decisions and your actions. Okay, individual, relational, collective. Read through these. This is really important stuff. As an org behavior class, as managers and organizational people who are responsible for getting work done through and with our people, we need to understand our people. And part of that is they need to be aware and understand themselves as well. Okay, so let's jump in, and I'm going to pull out some specifics. Okay, these are 3. Now, I've just skipped some. What I'm going to do is I'll leave you the whole PowerPoint. I'll load it up to Blackboard so you can have access as kind of a summary to the chapter. But these are some slides that I wanted to mention in particular. So self-esteem, I think we've all heard about that. Self-esteem is an attitude that you have about yourself. Okay, so an attitude, again, those 3 dimensions, we brought this up earlier, A, B, and C, affective, behavioral, and cognitive. Affective, your emotions, what you feel about yourself, cognitive, what you think about yourself, is they're going to reflect back in how you behave and maybe what you do to yourself or allow yourself to do. Okay, so self-esteem, just very important that we understand and boost people, that they feel good about themselves. And then if they feel good and think good about themselves, then they'll carry themselves differently and treat themselves differently. All right, so this one, high self-esteem, less influenced by others, more persistent, more logical thinking. So read through there. Self-efficacy. Now this is a great one, and this can also come back in, to a degree, it's going to come back in the motivation chapter. So I'm going to post a Tuesday video for y'all with a little example on self-efficacy, one that I like to do. But in particular, self-efficacy is basically your confidence, your belief, confidence that you have in your ability to do a task in particular. This comes from the work of Bandura. And where that comes from, it comes from direct experience. It comes about from watching or vicariously learning from others, and it also comes about from related experiences. So when you're confronted with a task, we all have this kind of evaluation of our ability to do that task. That's in essence self-efficacy, is the belief in ourselves to do something in particular. I'll do that more later. Locus control, I wanted to bring this up in order to talk about the attribution errors, fundamental attribution error. So locus of control, locus, I had to look up one time, it means center or origin. So what is the center or origin of control of your life? So when you are in a situation and you're trying to make sense of how I'm going to proceed and succeed, you have kind of the internal locus of control, which says that the origin of control in this moment, in this situation, is inside of me, it's me, versus it's external. The origin or center of control in this situation, in this task, doesn't reside within me, it resides outside of me. And so if you're an external locus of control, it says that, it's luck. I just happen to be in the right place at the right time, the wrong place at the wrong time. If I succeed, if I fail, it's really not because of me. It's just because, the planets aligned or didn't align. Okay, that's external locus of control. I'm not responsible. Something in the environment is responsible. Versus the internal locus of control says that success and failure in my life resides inside of me. And so I have to work, I have to prep, I have to perform, I have to do it. And if I mess up, it's because I messed up, and I'll learn from it, and I will use that to grow and perform better in the future. Okay, so locus of control, that's going to come back here in just a little bit, and we're going to tie it back to self-esteem and how we tend to make errors with this. Internal, I'm responsible for my successes and failures. External, there's something outside of me that kind of dictates whether I'm going to succeed or not, and I really don't have that much to do with it. So that's locus of control. Okay, these motives here, and really this is a big old slide here with a lot of words, really for this concept right here. As an org behavior class, this is something I think that you need to be aware of. It's kind of cool, kind of weird. When I was in grad school at the University of Alabama, big football school, I don't know if you realize that, but a big football school, all these people would come into campus for the home football games, and they would get there starting like on Thursday night, it seemed like, and they'd be there all day Friday, all these big RVs, and management and marketing, we were in the same department, and some of my buddies in marketing went out and interviewed a lot of those people, kind of qualitative. Who are you? Why are you here? Why do you like this? What's your connection to all this? And it turned out that there really weren't a whole lot of people that they talked to, at least. There were graduates. They were just Alabama fans. And maybe they had some distant connection, but they were Alabama fans. And everybody knew that they were Alabama fans. And so I kind of teamed up with my marketing buddies, and we wrote a paper on what we called fanatical organizational commitment. These are people who are connected to this organization, not necessarily because they went there or really had any kind of real investment in it, but they were committed to the organization because of the team. Now, why is that? That's weird. And so what we did for the model is we used the idea of a social identity theory, and we had to jump in there and explore. And what this model says is that we as individuals, we are known by the groups that we're a part of. So I'm wearing my black. Right now, you'll probably see me wear this again. I play in our church orchestra. And so for those people who know me there, I'm bass clarinet guy. I also play in our community band. I might be bass clarinet guy or I might be saxophone guy in that group. I don't know if it's coming up in other lectures in this group, but I've got a little karate school. So to other people, I'm known as Sensei Coleman. When I'm at school teaching my normal classes, I'm Dr. Patterson. When I'm with my kids, I've even been called, hey, you're Jack's dad, or you're Kirsten's dad, or, I'm my wife's husband. She does all this stuff, and then I'm that guy that gets to be a part of her world too. Social identity theory says that we as individuals, we're known by all these different groups that we belong to. What we did with the fanaticism, what we found is kind of a weird thing, but an interesting thing for organizational people, is that with social identity theory, when you connect yourself with a very successful other group, okay, why do people select Alabama to be associated with and not other places? Well, a lot of this has to do with this idea of the success of the group that I identify with. When that group succeeds, then in some weird way, I think, and those around me think, that I'm also successful. All right. Okay, so when I'm watching the football game on TV for the national championship and they win, all these people congratulate me. Well, I didn't play. I sat on the couch and watched it. When they lost, which they've done several times recently as well, when they lose, oh, I'm so sorry. Well, I didn't play. All I did was watch it on TV. But those are the concepts that when you identify with a group, then when the group succeeds, somehow that kind of rubs off on you. And then when it fails, also that kind of rubs off on you. That's why we don't want to associate ourselves with, perennial losers, because then in some weird way we might think that we're a perennial loser. Well, okay. So these are those concepts of social identity theory. As an organization, if you're thinking about who you're going to get to promote or endorse your products. You don't go get creepy people. You get people who that others regard as successful and want to emulate. That's why they do it. That's the same concept at play here with this idea of what we called fanatical organizational commitment. But social identity theory was in this chapter, and I just felt like I needed to tell you that story. So that's that idea, just one of these weird, interesting, neat organizational behavior ideas. This one, okay, so perceptual processes. Those who did the leadership class last term with me, we talked about cognitive categorization theory. Are we regarded as a leader or not regarded as a leader in the minds of our people? So if we look like a leader, we act like a leader, we do leadership things as compared to the mental model that's in our heads, the people's heads. If I look like that prototypical leader model that exists in the minds of the people, then they will categorize me, they will call me a leader until I do something that violates that information that's in my head, and then they might categorize me as something else. So with that, these ideas of perceptions, as organizational people, you're the ones in charge of other people. Do you look like the leader? Do you act like the leader? If so, then they might attribute leadership to you, but if you don't, they're probably going to attribute something else to you. Okay, but we know that some of these perceptual shortcuts, again, our minds don't have the ability to remember every single thing we encounter. So what we do is we tend to remember groups of information, chunks of information. And so when we are confronted with a decision and jump into our brain and refer to that thing that we're encountering, we look at basically kind of generalizations of past experiences that don't necessarily have the details. We must be aware of that, because what it can lead to is problems with stereotyping. So whenever we are confronted with one of these decisions, again, the example goes right back to that leadership. The stereotypical leader prototype that's in your head is based on past experience. And so not every leader is going to look exactly like that. And if you don't look like that, that doesn't mean you're not going to be a leader. So stereotyping are these perceptual shortcuts that unfortunately too many of us fall back on, and then don't really process or make sense and realize that the stereotype is a generalization and that the individuals that we're encountering may not go along with that generalization. So again, I wanted to bring this up because it was in the chapter. And like I said, there's just too much good stuff in this chapter to just kind of pass over. Problems with stereotyping. Again, I think I've kind of just mentioned those, and I think you probably understand those as well. Okay, attribution. Attribution. This is where we attribute an explanation for success or failure, the reason that things happen. So I left this one in here on purpose because it looks and sounds a lot like locus of control that I've just described, and that's what it is. Okay, so this internal attribution versus external. Again, external is factors beyond a person. Internal is the person's own motivation or ability. So they're using these same concepts, which are really locus of control, here under this attribution description as well. So attribution errors. Let's make sense of this. So, if we were in class and I had the ability to write on the board, I'd kind of give you a little example. At the end of the semester, let's pretend like you don't have all the weighted averages. Usually by the end of the semester, by the end of the term, you'll know how you're doing. I'll go in and do the math and drop the lowest earned grade, and then we'll add in the points for the extra credit. But you'll pretty much know. But let's pretend like it's a surprise. And at the end of the term, you're waiting, maybe your family and friends, roommates, whoever it may be, coworkers are all waiting around. They know that you've been all worried about this class and how you were going to perform. And then finally the time comes and you pull up your grade and there's a big old letter on there and it looks like that. And they say, well, how'd you do? And you would usually respond, I made an A. I made an A. Well, let's pretend like the result is something different. And I'll try to, let's pretend like it's the other end of the continuum. And there's a big old F on there. And so the people ask you, well, how did you do? How did you do? There's a tendency for us to say, that rotten person gave me an F. I made the A, but I was given the F. That's what this is right here. Self-serving bias. Look at this. The tendency to attribute our successes to internal factors. I succeeded, but our failures to external factors. Now, why do we do that? Because it's self-serving, because it protects our self-esteem. because we don't want to see ourselves as failing. We want to see ourselves as a winner and as a success. And so if information comes that kind of goes against that, I'm going to give it away. Well, that really wasn't my fault. Okay. Fundamental attribution error. Now, this is the flip-flop. So now your person, the people who work for you, they mess up, or your people succeed. What it is, it's the opposite. Self-serving bias, you keep internal. Internal are the reasons for success. External are the reasons for failure. But when you're overseeing other people, usually when they screw up, we tend to blame it on the internal things. It was them. They didn't devote enough time and energy to succeed. And then a lot of times, if they do succeed, there's also some credit. Well, it's because I'm a good teacher, because I helped them out, because I got them in the right place. But this one, really, it's the idea when your people mess up, you tend to overemphasize the internal causes. But when you mess up, you tend to overemphasize the external causes. You have to be consistent. Consistency, again, is one of those elements of self-concept. So truly internal people say, yes, I earned the A, but yes, I also earned the F. I really didn't devote the time and energy and get everything in when I was supposed to, and I'll learn from that. And that's how I'm going to protect my idea of self-esteem. I'm going to learn from that and do better next time. And when I see my people mess up, I'm not just going to automatically think it's because they messed up, but I'm going to take a step back and say, what could I have done better to help those people? Again, maybe they did mess up, but you need to, don't just automatically fall into this trap of that fundamental attribution error. All right. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, just the other night, one of my dad's favorite movies, I think, he talks about it a lot, is My Fair Lady with Audrey Hepburn. It was on TV the other night. It's very long, even on the Turner Classic Movie Channel, whatever it may be, with no commercials. But if you go do a little research, look at My Fair Lady and type in Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect is the self-fulfilling prophecy. I think My Fair Lady came out of a play called Pygmalion, and it's that idea of self-fulfilling prophecy. What a person is told and believes about themselves then reflects back in how they operate and view the world. In that movie, she's brought off of the street and turned into a lady, and then she believes that, and then she is transformed. A lot of this work is done with in schools. So you have a teacher who tells people that they are exceptional, they tend to rise to that occasion. But if you tell people that they're horrible and they'll never amount to anything, then unfortunately, we as people, we also tend to believe that too. So the self-fulfilling prophecy, what the person believes about themselves as received by other people, can reflect back in really kind of how they view the world and how they perform. Going back to my karate school, everybody can do this. You can do this. You can do this. I know you can. And when you succeed, I'm going to come over there and remind you that I told you could, and now you can. Okay, to boost people and to elevate people, to make them confident in what they can do, and to change kind of what they aspire to and how they work. Self-fulfilling prophecy. And on this next one, they talk about the halo effect. Some of these other effects, that thing that you learn first about a person, the thing that happens most recently with a person. Halo, once you learn something about a person, it can then spill over into other areas. We also learned that there's one called the halo and horns, where the halo is that I know something good about this person, and so they're obviously going to do good in other situations. The horns effect, if they acted like a little demon in this situation, they're probably going to act like a demon in other situations. As one's in charge, we need to be careful working with other people, as parents, as coworkers, as just organizational members in general. The idea to help instill positive self-fulfilling prophecies. So again, take a look at that. Again, this book has so much good stuff. These things that are known about yourself, characteristics of yourself, some of them are known to you. Some of them are not known to you. Some of them are known to others, and some of them are unknown to others. So this Johari window is a way of looking at this. So whether things open, this is stuff that you know about yourself and other people know about you. Known to others, but unknown to yourself, well, that's blind. That's things that you're not aware of. These are things that you know about yourself that you don't want others to know about. That's the hidden area. And then this is just the unknown. Okay, I'm not aware of this myself, and the people are not aware of it either. So Johari Window, and how you can use this to train and develop other people that you work with. All right, and finally, this global mindset ability, just kind of tying it all together, relating back to Hofstede as well. The realization that different people from different places have different models, they have different understandings, they have different perspectives, they have different sets of values. So just as organizational people, to be able to recognize differences across people groups. One of the things I do and have found so valuable with students are the study abroad opportunities and the ability to step into a different culture and to experience the culture and be the outsider, how incredibly valuable and rich that is. And then to make it more something that's part of your programming when you get back home and have empathy and understanding for people from other places. So again, great material from chapters 2 and 3. And go back and look, now that you've gone through all this, go back and look at the discussion questions. And like I said, for the Sunday reflection, your interpretation of the results from those 2 personality dimensions. So again, I hope that was helpful. It's been fun. Again, just a lot of good stuff. And we'll continue to go through it throughout the term.